Ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to begin our panel session entitled Transitioning Towards a Green Economy, Challenges, Strategies and Benefits. Please welcome Tan Zhi Ying, Head of Member Relations of UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, to be the moderator of this panel discussion. Let me also invite and introduce our speakers for this session. Mr. Mohamad Irwan Aman, General Manager for Sarawak Energy Berhad. Yang Berhormat Datuk Dr. Hazland Abang Hipni, Deputy Minister for Energy and Environmental Sustainability of Sarawak. Mr. Gurdip Singh Sidhu, CEO of CIMB Malaysia and CIMB Bank Berhad. And Ms. Wolff-Bye, Vice President and Group Chief Sustainability Officer of PETRONAS. I'll pass the floor to the moderator. Everyone, enjoy.
Hello, testing. All right. A very good morning to everyone. My name is Ying, so I'll be the moderator for this session. I believe everyone had heard the very empowering and powerful speech earlier from YB Tan Sri Datuk Johari. So I hope this sparks a fire within you. Keep the energy up. Being the first session today, I do expect to get more questions from the floor, from the audience. So just to share a bit about our session today, we will also actually have about a 30 minutes session, Q&A session. So all of you, I do hope you take this opportunity to ask some questions to our distinguished panelists over here today. So to start off this session, I think it's very clear earlier the MC have also explained about this panel session. It's talking about the transitioning into green economy. And we know that Malaysia has also set a bold and ambitious targets in terms of tackling climate change. So looking into committing to a net zero greenhouse gas emission as early as 2050, looking into including a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And in order to achieve this, one of this important element is also looking into embracing sustainable and renewable energy resources. Last year, the government unveiled the National Energy Transition Roadmap, in short, NETR. So it is a detailed strategy looking into how can we shift our energy system towards a cleaner, sustainable solution. And today we are fortunate to have a panel of distinguished speakers from leaders from policy making and industry to share about their insights. And to start off the session and to set off the stage, I would like to start off with a discussion talking about green energy ambitions as well as challenges. So we do know that the Sarawak state has been very advanced, has been very vocal in terms of talking about their ambition into green economy. So Sarawak plans to become a green energy powerhouse by 2035, and they will expand their renewable energy capacity to 15 gigawatts in the next 10 years. So my first question will be directed to YB Datuk Hazland. Would you be able to share with us the green economy strategies that Sarawak has in place, and what are some of these main challenges that Sarawak is expected to face?
Thank you, Zhi Ying. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to all the youths, all the alumni from Yayasan Perdana or Perdana Fellows. And thank you to Perdana Fellows and all the youths. Thank you to Ewanina and Said for inviting me to this Youth Economic Forum. First of all, I hope everyone here understands what climate change is all about and why it happened, how it happened, so that it's easy for us to understand what Malaysia and Sarawak has been doing and is trying to do, not only to mitigate climate change, but also to create new revenues, to monetize, and also to capitalize on whatever strengths and natural resources that we have in our country, especially Sarawak. So Sarawak has been very, very aggressive and very focused and highly committed, especially through our Right Honourable Premier, our current Right Honourable Premier, who has all the ideas on how to transition and how to capitalize and monetize whatever natural resources that we have in Sarawak for the last few years, actually, until in 2022, when we form our new ministry, which is called the Ministry of Energy and Environmental Sustainability, only formed about 2.5 years ago. And only then, we started to develop our policies, our rules, regulations, and so on, in order for us to achieve our green transitioning strategies. Now, I just would like to highlight on some of the strengths that Sarawak has. We are not boasting, but we're just sharing to you. We're just sharing. Sarawak, the first strength is the size of Sarawak. I'm sure there are a lot of Sarawakians here. And our size is as big as West Malaysia, which is about 12.4 million hectares. And 62% of that landmass is covered by forests, by peat, by mangrove. And also we have blue carbon sink and carbon stock. And this is what our carbon stock is consists in the 62% forest, mangrove and peat. And our estimated carbon sink in that 62% forest is actually between 750 billion tons to about 1 billion, to about 750 million tons to about 1 billion tons. That is not including the blue carbon in the ocean. So there you can see our strength in mitigating climate change through the nature-based solution. Because there are two solutions to solve climate issues. One is nature-based solution, the other is technical-based solution. And Sarawak also is blessed with a lot of rivers. We have actually more than 300 rivers. And on those huge rivers, we have developed our hydroelectric power. And this is the turning point for Sarawak. Yeah, it is our hydroelectric power. And the first hydroelectric dam that we constructed was in 1985, actually, in Matang Air. It's in Kuching, producing about 108 megawatts. And then we developed Bakun Electric Dam, which is producing about 2,400 megawatts. And then Murum, about 900 megawatts. And now Baleh is under construction. This is the turning point for Sarawak. It is hydroelectric power, right? So now we are going to increase that power because our current installed capacity is about 5,400 megawatts. 70% of it is hydropower, 70%. And we will increase it to about 10,000 megawatts by 2030 and 15,000 megawatts by 2035, right? The other strength that we have is, of course, our location, which is within the equator, and also our location, which is outside the ring of fire. This is very, very important because due to that, we are able to develop our carbon capture, usage, and storage industry because we have about 1,665 depleted oil wells in the offshore and onshore of Sarawak, which has a total potential storage space of about 9 billion tons of carbon. And this is going to be a new source of revenue for the whole country and especially for Sarawak. And of course, the next strength that we have is in our leadership. In this green initiatives, green strategy, leadership is very, very important. Even though we may have all the resources that we have, but if the leadership is not in line with the strategies, it will not be successful. So we have the leadership, and also, of course, we have political stability. And also, somehow or other, after COVID pandemic, Sarawak was the only state which developed a post-COVID development strategy. We call it the PCDS 2030, which is based on an economic recovery plan. You can download it from the public domain, and it is based on 3 pillars. 1 is social inclusivity, 2 is economic prosperity, and 3 is environmental sustainability, based on these 3 pillars. And if we follow all these strategies closely, we are able to double our GDP in the next 5 years. So that is the overall picture on what Sarawak strategy is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, YB, for sharing the strategy. My next question, actually moving on, is directed to Irwan. So Irwan is from Sarawak Energy, and Sarawak Energy does play an important role in terms of supporting whether it's Malaysia or Sarawak's ambition into this green economy transition. And perhaps for all of you who you are not aware, if you see the dams over here, these are also operated and owned by Sarawak Energy. So to Irwan, as a vertically integrated power utility in Sarawak, we know that Sarawak Energy has also developed your sustainability strategy and roadmap. So how does Sarawak Energy actually envision your role in supporting Malaysia and also Sarawak's goal towards low carbon economy, while also aiming to become a regional leader in the renewable energy sector?
Assalamualaikum and very good morning, everyone. Thank you, Zhi Ying, for that question. I think in terms of Sarawak Energy, we are vertically integrated company or corporations. So we see ourselves, we have big role to play, be it contributing to state, national, even global agenda. We need to link all this together from the bigger purpose up to where we are operating. So I think for Sarawak Energy, we are the largest renewable energy generator in Malaysia. So that's the values, that's the strengths that we have, supported what Datuk YB Hazland mentioned just now. So just one example, we are also exporting our energy to Kalimantan Barat. Okay, last year, 2022, from our energy, we displaced about 500 tons CO2 just from 2022 alone. Basically, because why? We are exporting energy from low carbon intensity to high carbon intensity. We are displacing that emission. That's just from the power export itself. So again, our role is to make sure that we are aligned, starting from global up to where we're operating. In 2023, Sarawak Energy, we have developed our own sustainability strategy roadmap. Okay, so when we develop this strategy, again, we are looking at all factors, external, internal, as far as we can go, that can impact Sarawak Energy. For example, our customer demand, new requirement from financial institution. All this we analyze, and then we develop our own strategy. Aligned with NTER, aligned with, as mentioned by Datuk Hazland just now, PCDS. Okay, so it's important for corporate to understand whatever we do, we should be aligning. Because whatever the trend, especially international or regional or within Malaysia, that will determine future business requirement. Okay, it can be a requirement in our financing and so on. So as a corporate, we need to be ready on this. So in our strategy, we have 5 main themes. Number 1 is sustainable leadership. Second is sustainable growth. Third will be business resilience. Fourth is climate action. Fifth, workforce and supply chain. I just want to take 2 examples. Number 1, on the sustainable leadership, it's important to have a proper structure in navigating toward all this decarbonization, green economy, and so on. So in Sarawak Energy, we just established board sustainability committee. Okay, that's at policy level. At management level, we have developed a group sustainability committee, which is looking at all the operation. So we talk about governance, because if you talk about sustainability, if you talk about climate change, it cut across all function within a company. I think it's similar when you work with YTL, it cut across. So we need that direction from the highest within the corporation. And then in terms of embedding sustainability practices, embedding element into our business model, that's part of the sustainability leadership. And then the fifth one, I don't want to touch all of this, but I think because it's relevant to youth, the last one is workforce and supply chain. Because all these are very new. If you talk about climate change, for example, renewable energy, energy efficiency, innovation is given. In order for us to achieve, to mitigate climate change, all this must happen. All right? That's why in our last theme or last pillar for our sustainability strategy and roadmap is basically our workforce. We need to develop the capacity within our workforce, be it from HR, from planning, and up to finance. What is it? How it impact you? And then we need to do all this reskilling and so on. That's why we have few programs. Number one, we have what we call Certified Sustainability Manager Program, working together with GCMY, so that our managers understand why sustainability, why is it important to us as a business, how that contribute to our business resilience, how that contribute to our business going concern, right? So not limited to staff, but we also have a program to our vendors, the supply chain, because if we want to go far, we need to bring everyone together, the ecosystem that support us. So we have our vendor programs, working with the banks. So whoever participate in this program, they will able to assess attractive funding. As long as they participate, they do a proper assessment, and that assessment will help us to identify what sort of program we can assist our vendors. All of this basically supporting PCDS. So we understand what we want, we understand what's the targets, how we're going to measure it. So basically that's where we are at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irwan, for sharing. I think before I go on to the next question, I just like to, I think earlier YB and also Irwan, you all shared a lot about the strategy and the plans. But perhaps in short, if you were to summarize, what would be one of the main challenges that, to implement all of these strategies and plans, what would you think the challenge would be? That one challenge? Yeah, just as a summarize. So perhaps YB or Irwan?
I think I need to get back to the slides so that it will be clearer. The challenges before we embark into any green initiatives is that we must have a framework. You must have a framework. You must have a plan. And the frameworks that my ministry has developed are based on four factors. The first framework is the legal framework. The laws, the regulations, the rules, the conditions, the certification, and so on must be there. That's why Sarawak has amended some of our laws in order to enable the green initiatives to be carried out. For example, our land code, our forest ordinance, and recently we just passed one new law, November last year, which is called the Environment Ordinance 2023, in bracket, Reduction of Greenhouse Gases Emission Ordinance. And one very interesting part of the ordinance is that we have already have a framework for carbon tax, for carbon levy. We call it carbon levy. That will be the first in Sarawak, in Malaysia, and it has been enforced in March this year for the industries. The second framework that we must have ready is the technical framework. This is quite simple actually. Don't be scared. Don't be too inferior. Don't feel so inferior. Malaysia is there, Sarawak is there. Because if we are not there, if we don't have the technical expertise, how did we develop our first hydroelectric dam in 1985? And we have developed 3 more huge dams until now. So there must be some kind of technical expertise. I mean, Iqmal is here, we are all here. We all have the technical expertise. But what we need if we want to go further, is a technical partner, an international expert technical partner, right? For example, Sarawak is going to develop our hydrogen plants. We have two hydrogen plants to be developed in Bintulu, and we are partnering with Sumitomo, with Ineos, with Samsung, and so on. Yeah? So that is the strategic technical partners. The third framework is the financial, business and taxation framework. So we have CIMB here. He'll be talking about that. And the fourth framework, which is also as important, is the human resource and talent development framework. That's where we are, and we are working with the universities, with the colleges, and so on to train our boys and girls to become the technicians in the hydrogen factories and so on. Yeah? So these are the main challenge is the framework.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, YB, for summarizing that. Irwan?
Yeah, I think fully agree with Datuk mentioned just now. It's similar with corporate. You need to have a policy, you have to have the strategy, you have to have the measurement, and then you have the people. But then again, the critical part as a corporate, in any corporate, is about the mindset of your people. Because if you talk about sustainability, if you are in finance, for example, you need to look it from a holistic perspective, system mindset. It's not just one process after another. Everything need to be linked. For example, how important is measuring climate GHG, for example, for a corporate. Finance will normally, people, finance will say, nothing impact us, so why bother, all right? But now, for Sarawak, we have this ordinance, so we are doing reporting, and in the future, there will be a tax to us. Luckily, we prepare since 2014 to measure. And now, every quarterly, we have to submit to Datuk Hazland Ministry for compilation. So we are not too sure about the quantum yet, how big is the impact to us, but we are going toward that direction. That's why for youth, right, be open, all right, have a system, just train yourself looking at whatever you do in a more holistic manner, how you impact others and how others impact you within your function. I think that's the main challenges, especially in corporate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irwan. Okay, so moving to the next area that I wanted to discuss is actually talking about driving the net zero ambition. So we know that in the energy and also climate world, everyone has their own opinion about roles of oil and gas industry in the transition towards net zero emission. And my next question is to Charlotte. So in 2020, PETRONAS became the first Southeast Asian oil and gas firm to declare its aspiration of achieving net zero carbon emission by 2050. And of course, in 2022, you have came up with the pathways. So I'd just like to understand, why does PETRONAS think this ambition is viable? And what strategies does PETRONAS has in place to achieve this?
Thank you very much, Zhi Ying, for this question. And also, I must start by saying it's so hugely humbling to be here, and the future needs an empowered youth. So, and this, of course, this room here shows that the youth is empowered, and I can't wait to read this document that was just shared. So this is a very good start to the Saturday, and thank you for having PETRONAS here. So maybe just to frame a little bit your question and about the drivers about net zero for PETRONAS. So let me start maybe by talking a little bit about climate science and also the energy systems of today. Now, as we know, we have climate change. And over the last decade, we actually been enjoying, if you like, 1.2 degree global warming above the levels since the Industrial Revolution started 200 years ago, which means we're actually now really near the tipping points as per the Paris Agreement that talks about reaching or aiming to curb emissions to well below 2 degrees Celsius and to make the best efforts not to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are very close to that now. And scientists tell us that we don't want to reach these tipping points because they are tipping points and we don't really know what the consequences could be. The Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, the IPCC, which is sort of a group of scientists represented by all UN member states, talk about how important it is to limit emissions, first of all, to peak emissions before 2025 and to limit emissions or drive down emissions by 43% by 2030. So this is a very important driver in the net zero carbon emission strategy for PETRONAS, but also I think for countries and other entities in society to focus on driving down emissions. Now, talking briefly about energy. The world right now, about 80% of the energy comes from fossil fuels. We know, of course, that renewable energy there's a big ramp up in renewable energy. The investments in renewable energy today actually surpass investments in traditional conventional energy sources. However, energy demand has also been growing. So this energy mix is stubborn and is sticking. So whilst there's lots more renewable energy in the energy system globally, we still have about 80% is in fossil fuels. But of course, over time, this will change, but we need to make sure it changes fast enough. In ASEAN, it's pretty much a similar picture. Just over 80% of the primary energy mix is fossil fuels. And in Malaysia, it's actually 96% of the primary energy comes from fossil fuels, so coal, gas, as well as oil. The majority of emissions in this country come from this energy system. So why do I mention this? Because our energy system, the global energy system, is very intrinsically linked to climate change. So we do need to address the energy system as we are acting on climate change. So right now in PETRONAS, we have our net zero carbon emission pathway, as you mentioned, Zhi Ying, since 2022. And it has sort of two legs, if you like. So we have a pathway which talks about driving down our emissions. So it's a strategy of reducing emissions, as well as Datuk Hazland also talked about, grabbing the opportunities for growth. We have midterm targets, short-term and midterm targets, so we aim to peak our emissions by the end of this year. By 2030, we wish to drive down emissions by 25% and then reach net zero by 2050. Of course, these types of plans, we're constantly working on them and also revisiting our assumptions and as we are maturing our approaches. So how we consume or produce and consume energy globally as well as here in Malaysia really needs to change. And that's why we need youth forums like this to really empower for the future that we want. In PETRONAS, we also, so it's not just about the reduction agenda, which is about driving down emissions in how we produce that energy, but it's also about growing new business opportunities and economies and industries. So we have a number of areas that we're focusing on, such as renewable energy, but also biofuels. We have specialty chemicals and hydrogen, as also was mentioned earlier. And on hydrogen, we have a partnership in Sarawak specifically. But this is all these new value chains require skills, as we've been talking about, and investment, technology, and we can't focus or drive these fast enough. We really need to sort of get the sweet spot between good policy, technology, investments, and skill all at the same time to drive these new opportunities for us all. In PETRONAS, net zero carbon emission is not just about climate change. It's also about nature and biodiversity, as well as about just transition. Nature and climate are intrinsically linked. We understand that, and we are developing and maturing our efforts and our skills and understanding in this area very much. Right now, COP16, the Convention on Biological Diversity, is happening in Colombia, And it will be very interesting to see what outcomes will come from this meeting, because that will also drive the expectation on how corporations such as PETRONAS could support and contribute biological diversity going forward. And also here, we're working with Sarawak. We recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the Sarawak Forestry Corporation on looking to find opportunities around nature-based climate solutions. And just transition, so important, and here youth really needs to come into play. What is the type of a future we want, and how can we make sure that these big investments in climate as well as the next generation of energy will benefit as many people as possible, and so that prospects are brighter for everybody. So that's kind of our drivers and motivations and where we are on net zero.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing. I do have a follow-up question for you. We understand the role of PETRONAS played in our country itself, driving the economy and all. But I know at the international global level, there has been scrutiny on oil and gas industry, talking about environmental commitments, right? So I'm interested to actually hear from your perspective, and what are your thoughts in terms of accusations of greenwashing that are sometimes aimed specifically towards oil and gas companies. So how do you view this as challenges in relation to the industry's transition towards sustainability?
So it's very important that I think previous speakers have sort of framed your question very well. You need to be clear about your strategy, your motivations. You need to have plans. You need to have the skills in place. You need to have the fact base. As Irwan was talking about, you need to measure your impact. This is very, very critical. And also have independent assurance. You know, you measure and you calculate your emissions, for instance, and then also have it independently assured. This is very important. It is important to be fact-based. This is not about acting on climate change. Is not an ideology. It's not a marketing ploy by any means. We need to make sure that we adhere to international frameworks and really have the solid fact base as we communicate and engage with society. But I think also it's important that we are open for scrutiny. So disclosures are very important, and youth groups and other grassroots groups, as well as other constituents in society, kind of need to hold us accountable. I think that's very important.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for sharing that. All right, so talking about transitioning and all, of course, financing plays a huge role to ensure that everybody gets to transition into the green economy. So next question to Gurdip. As part of CIMB's broader 2050 net zero commitments, CIMB has also established this 2030 decarbonization goals for 6 emission-intensive sectors, namely thermal coal mining, cement, palm oil, power, oil and gas, and also real estate. And you have also announced your ambitious 100 billion ringgit sustainable finance target. So the question is, what does these commitments mean for your clients, and how does CIMB plan on financing the transition while also ensuring this capital are directed towards sectors that will impact Malaysia's transition to low-carbon economy?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Zhi Ying, for the question. Thank you to the organizers for having us here. You know, maybe as a bit of a context, you know, we've got the government, we've got the corporate sector, and, you know, obviously, maybe I'll start with a little bit of recap of the role of banks, right? And, you know, to many of you, you know, you may understand what banks do at a level that you interact with the bank, but overall, in the context of this topic of, you know, our transition, we play a role of mobilizing capital to be in line with the aspirations of both the government as well as the private sector or the corporates themselves. So what have we done, if I could, maybe just to, you know, put a bit of context to the question on what we have set out to do, right? So long and short, you know, you've heard about net zero. So net zero happens at the, you know, aggregate country level. It happens at a state level, potentially. It happens also at a corporate level. So just like many corporates around the world, CIMB has likewise committed to achieving net zero by 2050. And then we've got a sub-target of Scope 1 and 2, which is essentially, long and short, our internal emissions to be net zero by 2030, and then overall, including our clients' finance emissions by 2050. And then as one of the key way that we sort of work towards that is really the principle of minimizing harm and maximizing positive impact. And what Zhi Ying, you mentioned about the 100 billion, that 100 billion is really our small part that we play within the ecosystem in the country and across ASEAN to essentially propagate positive action. Yeah, and so I'm pleased to say that many of those targets are quite well progressed. The other point that maybe not many of you would know this, if you think about Scope 1, 2, and 3, and for those who are more well versed with it, different sectors and different industries have very different mix of what the percentages are for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 to your respective businesses. In banking, and CIMB's numbers won't be very different to other banks. What this chart more or less just tells you is that if you look at the far right, which is our Scope 3, which is essentially the emissions that are linked to our clients, right, and the business that we do with them, that far surpasses whatever emissions we are doing. So i.e. our Scope 1 and 2, which you see on the left. So if you do the maths between the right and the left, it's something like 340 times bigger, right? So the message here is that the role of a bank in this whole agenda of transitioning really only moves the dial when we are able to do it with our clients, right? So that's an important message. And so I'll come to this point about the 6 sectors and how we are thinking about doing it. But just before that, I think to the keynote speaker Tan Sri shared a little bit about this whole positivity about Malaysia, and I share a lot of that. For many of you, and especially those who may have studied overseas, you would have always had this sort of mixed views, whether is Malaysia progressing, is Malaysia digressing, etc., etc. But I think long and short, we have a lot more positives than negatives, right? So Malaysia's starting point in the mathematics equation of getting to net zero is actually not a bad one. Those who are interested here, if you haven't read this report by WWF and BCG, do read it. It kind of just simplifies the task ahead for us, right? And this chart more or less tells us that there's a bunch of tailwind for this whole area, and there's a little bit of headwind that we need to be conscious about. But generally, there's more tailwind than headwind, right? So an example of a headwind is, Malaysia is a big trading nation, and Malaysia's big export countries, or the countries that large parts of our companies export to, have all sorts of net zero commitments and targets, and you would have heard things about, CBAM and all of that, which is essentially raising the bar in terms of the emissions that come with the import of products from countries like Malaysia. And then, of course, you talk about the tailwind. The good thing is a lot more flow of funds and commitments are out there. And then, sort of now, talking about the 6 sectors that you mentioned and how our thinking revolves around that. So the 6 sectors that Zhi Ying, you mentioned really represents about 60% of our portfolio, right? And so we picked the 6 sectors mainly because of, 1, the materiality of the sector. 2 is also the relevance to the country's priorities and agenda. And you will see even in the recent budget, there is some early mention of 2026 carbon tax for a couple of sectors, etc. And so as much as possible, we try and align our targets, our initiatives to materiality, right? Materiality from the perspective of the country, the government, materiality from the starting point of our book, etc. And then, so finally, to your question on, what does that really mean and how we're going to do it? So these 6 sectors, what we've done is we've put targets by 2030, what is the intensity reduction for each sector? So you will see that, for example, if you pick palm oil, we will say that we want to reduce the carbon intensity per ton of production by 16%. In oil and gas, we want to likewise reduce it by 16%. You will see some other sectors like power, there's a much higher target. And why is power a high target? It's very clear to achieve the nation's ambition of a transition to net zero, the power sector carries a disproportionate role to help us get there. And it's no-brainer, right? Because almost all sectors utilize power. Whether you are in manufacturing, whether you are in services, you utilize power. So if the power grid or the power sector remains static in terms of its energy mix, then the country is going to have that much of a harder task to achieve its outcome. So the power sector is very important, and it's very pleasing to see whether it's Sarawak Energy, whether it's Tenaga here in Malaysia, with the help of PETRONAS, everyone is on this similar direction of sort of, galvanizing efforts to get the whole ecosystem and the whole country there. And then the final point on, back to banking and what we do and how we think of this. This chart is kind of not real numbers, but just to illustrate how we think about actually realizing that reduction. So if you think of the baseline starting point for energy being where we were currently, and we want to get to 38% reduction come 2030, the way we look at it is there's passive levers and active levers. Passive levers generally come about with commitments typically that the companies themselves are doing. So like Irwan will talk about Sarawak Energy having its own commitment, right? So if they were to essentially execute those commitments, that will more or less achieve the passive outcomes for us, meaning we don't have to do very much. The companies will do it, and we will basically support them in whatever way, and that lever will be achieved. The right side, which is the active levers, this is where we will proactively, going back to my point about maximizing positive impact, we will proactively finance more in the future in areas that are lower carbon intense, right? So, and again, there's no brainers in the energy sector, what that could mean. Much of what YB Minister was talking about around the projects in Sarawak, and likewise for the energy companies in other parts of Malaysia, is really around disproportionately allocating more future financing towards the greener sectors. Having said that, and to preempt a question that maybe you guys may have, or quite often the press has for us, does this mean that CIMB or banks generally will be reducing financing to all the sectors? The short answer is no, and this is important to understand. We are measuring intensity of emission per dollar of financing. We are not, other than coal, where we have an absolute reduction target, all the other sectors is intensity reduction. So, even oil and gas, we are looking that by 2030, our lending book to oil and gas may double, right? However, there will be a disproportionate shift in the areas and projects that we are financing, so that the absolute intensity per dollar of financing drops. So maybe I'll stop here, Zhi Ying, and hopefully that was useful to give context to the audience.
Yep, it does. Thank you so much, Gurdip, for sharing that. Just a bit of a follow-up question as well, because I noticed that it was announced that as of December 2023, CIMB has actually already achieved 80% of your sustainable finance target, so reaching 80 billion. So were there any challenges that you faced, to achieve this goal? And what would be the next step?
Okay, so challenges, there are plenty. So how much of time do you have?
Okay, 2 minutes in a
Okay.
summarized challenge, yeah.
So I'll talk about internal challenges and external challenges, okay? Internal challenges is, I've got some of my colleagues in the audience who are bankers, and the internal challenge is people will continue to push business in areas that they are most familiar with. And, so green financing, transition financing is not something that everyone has a very high knowledge of to start with, right? So there's a bit of a learning curve, and that's a big challenge. So we, from the center are saying, okay, we got to, channel a lot more effort to this. But at the same time, we still give budgets to bankers who need to achieve their budgets, and they will achieve that budgets in maybe not necessarily these areas, right? So there's a bit of an internal navigation to ensure that we are getting up the learning curve and really pushing the solutions out there. There's also that technical gap in knowledge between the solutioning that companies need and how far the banks are able to bridge that. Of course, for very big corporates like PETRONAS and Sarawak Energy, etc., where the maturity is so high, that's fine. That's not an issue. But as you can imagine, as we go down the size of companies and we get to, let's say, what I call SME clients or mid corporates, then the internal familiarity in those companies are much less. They don't really have a chief sustainability officer. They may not have the infrastructure. So then we have to do a lot more to do what I call capacity building, right? To help them sort of understand why this makes a difference and hopefully bring them, how do I put it, a little bit ahead of that tipping point curve. Because a lot of companies will really react when there is a big wake-up call, right? So if you are an exporter, your wake-up call is when, you know, your importer is starting to import more from Vietnam than Malaysia because of, you know, certain emission levels being higher, for example, here. But that wake-up call has not come to everyone yet. To the big corporates, that wake-up call has come, but to the average SME, that wake-up call hasn't come. So that's a little bit of that balance of internal and external. I think on just closing off the challenge on the external, you know, there's a little bit of this, why do I need to do it, right? And how we have tried to bridge that is we have tried to put some motivation. So, you know, Irwan, you talked about you guys measuring your GHG since 2014, and that's brilliant. So we have done certain things with our sustainability-linked loan structures where we put a reduction in the interest rate if the company hits certain of their sustainability targets. So if you're already tracking your GHG and you've got your intensity and you know you need some financing from CIMB, we will give you the financing and we'll say, hey, guess what? We will give you a 10 or 20 bips lower interest rate if you hit your emission targets or some other targets that we feel mutually are good. So yeah, so it's a little bit of that sort of challenges that we've had to deal both internally and externally.
Thank you so much, Gurdip, for sharing that. So in view of time, we do have about 25 minutes left. Perhaps before I go on with my questions, I'd like to give this opportunity to the audience here. So does anybody has any questions to ask? I was informed that there will be mics around. So please head to the mics on the middle pathway. Come up and introduce yourself and take this opportunity to ask our panelists some questions.
Hello, good morning. My name is Yusran Rosman. I'm Perdana Fellow Batch 2021. I'm also a licensed officer for the Malaysian International Youth Exchange program under the Malaysian Youth Council. And also, Gurdip, I'm TCB Batch 57. You interviewed me. Okay. So there's a study, a report by the World Bank that said that in 2023, there are 5 times more graduates being churned out of our university compared to the high-skilled jobs that have been offered. Every year we see these trends, and every year we also keep hearing about the corporate players, the government encouraging us to upskill and reskill. But to me, I feel that upskilling and reskilling is not effective when there are no jobs to go around. There's too many supply, too little demand in terms of the availability of the jobs. So I speak on behalf of university graduates as well, as I'm from UIAM. What do you think of the idea of, let's say, allocating a certain percentage of the high-ranking officers or CEOs, their salaries sometimes go up to 200,000 ringgit per month. How about we allocate that to open more jobs for fresh graduates? What do you think of that idea?
I think I can answer that. You see, the basic question is on employment. Yeah? So employment basically depends on the market requirement of the country, isn't it? So if the country now is moving towards a green economy, definitely we'll need more technicians, more engineers, chemists, biochemists, oil and gas, all the experts in the new economy. If I can share my slide, you'll be quite clearer. You'll be clearer. Can I have my next slide on our energy policy for Sarawak? Sarawak has developed our own energy policy after the frameworks, which is based on the 8 energies that we have in Sarawak. As mentioned by Tan Sri Johari just now, we have 8 energies. Number 1 is we have hydro electric power. 2 is solar. 3 is wind. We also have wind, We have wind offshore of Sarawak, which is about 100 nautical miles away. And we are partnering with Shell to develop our wind, to harness our wind energy. And 4th is our wave kinetics energy. Even from the wave in the ocean, we can harness energy. And our first project is in Bintulu, okay? And 5th, of course, we have hydrogen. Hydrogen, we are already there. 6th, we have synthetic fuel through methanol. And we have already developed our first methanol plant in Bintulu. There you are, there's about 500 employees. And hydrogen plants, one plant requires about 1,000 employees. 1,000, one plant. We have 2 plants. And there are 3 more plants waiting. Yeah? And bioenergy, we have bioenergy through 4 biomass feedstock. Number 1 is microalgae, together with PETRONAS. We are working to produce biodiesel and also sustainable aviation fuel, and we have started in Sarawak, and we are going to develop our first microalgae farm in Bintulu of about 10,000 acres, which can produce about 500 barrels per month of sustainable aviation fuel. There you are. I mean, these are opportunities for you. And second feedstock, biomass, is wood pellet, which can be converted into energy, and also bamboo pellets. And now recently is nape grass pellet. It's from the grass. You can plant grass, and produce pellets which can power our power plants anywhere we are. And also, of course, last but not least is our oil and gas industry, because we still need LNG for the transition period of about roughly 10 to 15 years for us to transition fully into the green economy. So that is the basis of our Sarawak energy policy. And this is also going to be your opportunities, your work opportunities. And I left out CCUS now, carbon capture, usage and storage, which Sarawak has the potential of 9 billion tons of carbon storage space, and also another 3 trillion in our saline aquifers in Sarawak. And this could be also the answer and the solution for your question just now on greenwashing. Yeah, on greenwashing. That's why now the countries in the world are going towards carbon storage, direct capture of carbon, liquefy, store underground. Yeah, that is the answer towards the actual reduction of carbon emission. And if we are to target the reduction of about 45% by 2030 and net zero by 2050, our technology must be a very fast one. It cannot be depending on the trees alone, on the peat alone, on the mangrove alone. There must be technical solutions to it through not only CCUS, but also the renewable energies. Yeah? So these are your opportunities. My next slide, which is even better, is Sarawak has developed our green economy policy. Yeah? Green economy policy, which is not found in Malaysia yet. So Sarawak is very proud to say that we have developed this policy for you and for everybody. And it is based on a low carbon economy policy with social inclusivity and based on the pillars, the different sectors of economy. It is very, very detailed. As you can see, we have implemented it already, and we have 31 strategies. And if I were to go into this in detail, I will need another 3 hours. Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, YB, for answering that. So we move on to the next question. I would have to take the second mic over here, so we have equal chance. So please go ahead.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. I'm Aman from IIUM, and I'm also a Sarawakian. So I already known about the PCDS, Netter, and also ni. So I have perhaps two questions to YB Datuk Dr. Hazland. So first, regarding the Sarawak, how Sarawak government will leverage the ASEAN chairmanship next year? Perhaps you can share your recap on the outcome from the Singapore International Energy Week back in last week. And the second question is, do Sarawak government and Sarawak Energy have found the mechanism to increase and maximize the efficiency of the hydrogen fuel? And also because, as I read just now, the current price of the hydrogen is 60 to 80 cents per kilowatt hour. And according to the forecast from the MOSTI, in the next 5 years, the price of the hydrogen will be 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So did the Sarawak government already found the mechanism to reduce the price of the hydrogen?
Thank you very much. Siapa nama tak?
Aman, nama me Aman.
Aman. Dari sana kita.
Me dari Kuching, area Putrajaya.
Oh, okay. Very good question. Just now, remember our Tan Sri also spoke on how are we going to make use of their position, his position, and also ASEAN's position and Malaysia's position in the ASEAN Summit, the coming ASEAN Summit next year, right? Because next year, Malaysia will be the host for the ASEAN Summit. Now, this is a very good question because if we are talking about carbon trading and carbon credits, yeah, in ASEAN, we do not have a system yet. There's no system. We are trading only through the voluntary carbon market, willing buyer, willing seller. That means the price is quite low as compared to the actual price, which is through the compliance trading method, which can only be done if we have an emission trading system, ETS, which ASEAN doesn't have at the moment. Only available in Europe, in Canada, in US, in Australia, in New Zealand, Korea, and so on. Yeah? So this is what is lacking. And we have met with the Minister of Natural Resources, Malaysia, last month in Sarawak, in Kuching. And we have informed him, and also our Premier has spoken to our Prime Minister to take that opportunity next year during the ASEAN Summit, yeah, to propose an ASEAN ETS for all of us in ASEAN. Because at least countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Laos are very active in the nature-based solution strategy. Okay, so that is the answer. We must make use of that position. Even Tan Sri Johari should make full use of his position as the chairman of the Parliamentary Association of ASEAN. And the second question is on hydrogen efficiency. Okay, this is a very technical question. Sarawak is ahead of the others as usual. So we have developed our own electrolyzer assembly and distribution facility in Kuching, Sarawak, whereby we design our own electrolyzer using our own scientists, local Sarawakian scientists, who is working with PETRONAS actually. And this facility is a joint venture between the Sarawak GLC, SEDC Energy, and also PETRONAS through Lestari. We are producing better electrolyzers, which can reduce the usage of electricity from the usual 60 kilowatt per hour to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. Now we only require 30 kilowatt per hour to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen, and it will even reduce further as time goes by, right? Then only hydrogen will be the most affordable and will be the energy of the future. Right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Datuk, for the answering the question.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to the next one.
Yes. Okay. Hi, my name is Shamil. I am an A-level student from College Tunku Jaafar. My question is from my mother, who is a doctor at UTM, a lecturer. Her question is, would it actually be more economical, beneficial to do R&D in making oil much more efficient to reduce carbon emission rather than R&D in renewable energy? And do you think it's the responsibility of fuel companies to do this, or more like car manufacturers? So probably like Charlotte can answer this.
Well, thank you for your question, and thank you for your mom also to engage on this topic. Very important to have dinner conversations around these things. Whose responsibility is it to decarbonize? Of course, I think I mentioned before, how we produce and consume energy must transform, and that means everybody has a role to play. But also we know that we have a climate emergency on our hands, which means we all need to do our part right now. So whose responsibility is it? Well, it is everybody's responsibility. But how can you go about it? And I think maybe a little bit about the Malaysian situation. So in the energy sector, we tend to talk about something called the energy trilemma. You need to have energy security, it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be sustainable. You might remember a couple of years ago, there was a sort of gas crunch, especially in Europe, because of geopolitical situation. The German swimming pools were lacking hot water, and everybody was asked to knit jumpers. This was a real reality, and it was a wake-up call for the world to realize that energy security can't be taken for granted. So there's also, it's very important, if you look at the big empires of the past, the Roman Empire, Ottoman, and so on, GDP only grew sort of in a steady Eddie way. But when fossil fuels came into play about 200 years ago, GDP growth and societal growth went straight up. It was a complete change. So fossil fuels has been incredibly important to drive economic development globally, and also driving social progress. There is no modern lifestyle without energy. There's also no rich country that's energy poor. A lot of research has shown you need an abundance of energy to thrive. But how can we make the current energy system not affect the sustainability of the future? So this is sort of the part of the energy trilemma. So in PETRONAS' case, we are relentlessly focusing on driving down the emissions of our operations. We are also working with partners to see how can we help them drive down the emissions that they sort of are responsible for in burning the fuel that we and others sell them. So for instance, we have a very thriving subsidiary in PETRONAS called Gentari, and some of you might drive electric vehicles, and maybe you have plugged in your car in a Gentari charging point. So this is one example of how we're trying to drive down transport emissions. We're also working with big power customers, for instance, in Japan, to enable carbon capture and storage, so that we sell them our LNG, but then also how can we perhaps capture those emissions from that LNG and store it and securely forever. So everybody has a role to play, and also in the room here there were talks about jobs for graduates and so on. Do take an active interest, and there's a lot of young energy clubs out there also internationally that you can join and engage in the topic, because we need everybody involved in this. Also, we need to decide as a society what is it that we want and how fast do we want to go.
Can I just add a little bit, because it's a very interesting question. Number one, we must also realize that humans have been using fossil fuel the wrong way for the last 200 years. Why? Because now 60% of the oil and gas that we produce is used for industrial power and transportation. And only 40% is used for petroleum products production. It should be the other way around. It should be 40% only for industrial and transportation, 60% for petroleum products. So the scientists must discover, innovate, and try to find ways how to make use of petroleum products in another way. For example, production of composite materials. That is a very huge area that you can do, and PETRONAS is doing that at their research center in Bangi. You can visit that center. You know, Sarawak learned a lot from that center in Bangi, and also that is the situation now. The other thing is that the non-oil producing countries of the world have already learned a lesson that they have been bullied all this while by the oil producing countries. And that fact was made stronger during the Ukraine-Russian conflict. You know, what happened? The price of oil and gas skyrocketed, and it affected the economy and the people and the livelihood. So we must find another alternative energy. Alternative energy. And the alternative energy is actually hydrogen. Is hydrogen. That is the energy of the future. Even if you can remember, at least those doing science, that the gas in the outer space, is almost 80% hydrogen and almost 20% helium, and the rest is carbon dioxide, oxygen, and so on. So what is the message that God is trying to tell us, right? It's there already. Hydrogen is in outer space. And hydrogen is also found in the ground. We can mine hydrogen. That is natural hydrogen. But now the technology is still developing, and we can only produce hydrogen through electrolyzers, through electrolysis, through pyrolysis, and through gasification. There are three ways of producing hydrogen at the moment. So the other thing is that you must know is hydrogen can be produced by any country in the world. Any country can produce hydrogen. Not any country can produce oil and gas. But any country can produce hydrogen if they have two things. What are the two things? One is water, the other is energy to split the water. So every country has got water. The only question is the energy. Which energy does that country have? Do they have fossil? Are they using coal? Are they using nuclear? Or are they using solar and hydropower, which will produce green hydrogen? So that is the trend. That is the world trend. Okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much, YB. We still have time for one last question. So I'll invite lane 2, the mic from lane 2.
Thank you, dear moderator. Hello, everyone. My name is Astrid from Indonesia as one of the delegates of the Malaysia International Youth Exchange organized by Malaysia Youth Council. Firstly, we agree with the points mentioned by the esteemed speakers that it's important to have strong resource mobilization, financing, and capacity building, as these three aspects are instrumental to help realize green economy transition. However, the point is that currently there's a broad scope of green economy transition. For example, in March 2022, at the 5th session of the UN Environment Assembly, there was a resolution to develop international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including marine environment. It means that in the future, there's going to be more forums on plastic treaty, just like nowadays the world is more focusing on climate treaty. And there's the issue of course, discussing about the challenges of shifting the burden. But my question is not about fairness between developed countries and developing countries. But as an Indonesian whose government has decentralization policy from central to local government, I'd like to ask to the panel and perhaps to YB, that to Dr. Hazland, what strategies does your institution plan to implement to ensure fairness between rural and urban areas in transitioning to a green economy? Thank you.
I think I let Charlotte answer the plastics
Yeah.
first. Or Irwan.
Yeah, perhaps, I mean, in view of time, perhaps in just a very short summary in 1 to 2 minutes, maybe all panelists can also just share a bit of your insights on the question.
So thank you again very much for that question, because pollution is also incredibly important for us to consider and to engage in. And I think on pollution, we really need the grassroots to get involved and be mobilized on this topic. So you obviously need policy and regulation, but also you need and here youth really matters. What is the future we want? Because you will set the social norms for the future. What is that norm? So this is where your voice is incredibly important. And it's not just on plastics, but there's other areas of pollution as well. And so we need society to get very, very engaged on this. We'll see what the outcomes of these negotiations are at the United Nations level. But also PETRONAS obviously sits in the plastic value chain, but it's something we're very aware of and proactively engaging on, because there is a plastic pollution problem, and we will see how we can, as part of that value chain, mobilize our customers to sort of engage on that more proactively. But also we need to work with authorities, cities, and actually consumer groups to see how we could solve this together. That is an all-society solution that has to be addressed with urgency as well. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Charlotte. Gurdip, do you have anything to add on?
Not so much on plastic. I think just maybe 2 points. I assume we're going to wrap up, right? So one is, I think this whole concept of fairness. So from a, I guess, political side, there is that urban-rural, but I think from a institution such as ours, when we talk about transition, we always add the word just transition, which many of you would read and hear. It's quite commonly referred to. But in simple terms, what it really means is it is not a transition at all cost. It is a transition that takes into account the various stakeholders, including those that are typically more marginalized, right? So that's one lens to maybe that perspective of rural-urban, but I'm sure YB will have that. But maybe I assume we are wrapping up, so you're not going to ask us to say anything after this, right? Yeah, so maybe I'll just take opportunity to say just one last point. I think, when I saw that we had 1,200 people in this forum, I think on this topic at least, and you're going to talk a lot more about other topics, but at least in this topic, I feel there's a disproportionate role that the youth have in continuing that momentum on this topic, right? Simply because you are more vested than us. You have a longer runway to live than us here on the panel. Maybe not everyone on the panel, but a few of us. So, it is for you to be a lot more engaged to innovate and pressure, because you have the power to pressure. You have the power to pressure your parents and your family in what choices they make. You've got the power to elect representatives that you believe are doing the right thing. You have the power on social media to criticize companies and people who may not be doing the right thing. So use that power that you have, but at the same time use the brain power of suggesting innovation and really, furthering this whole topic and space. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gurdip. Irwan, do you want to add on?
Continue from what Gurdip mentioned just now. I think youth, you have a big role to play, all right, to change the behavior, right? You need to create alliance, talk among yourself, what you can do, what you can push. Even in corporate, we need to create that alliance, having partners outside, for example, Sarawak Energy, outside Sarawak Energy to talk about sustainability and so on. So it's important for youth to have this vision, what you can influence. Everyone have their own boundary that you can influence. But if you go together as a big or as an organization, you have a bigger impact. I think I'd just like to touch on the plastic example just now. 5 years ago, no one talked about, everyone once they order drink, everything with plastic straw, right? Now I think even in Sarawak Energy, no more plastic bottle and so on. So they change your behavior, okay? We can start with our level first, then the treaty and so on. That will be another driver to push us forward. I think that's I would like you to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Irwan.
Okay, as usual, I'm the defender of this. So, have you heard of waste to energy? WTE. WTE, waste to energy. You know, we can produce energy and create new revenues from waste. And Sarawak is already there, and we just developed our waste to energy policy. Waste to energy policy. I have the slide, but it's not coming up. It is based on our different types of waste. Yeah, we categorize it as the municipal waste, which include the plastic and the household waste and so on, the agricultural waste, the industrial waste, the inert waste, and lastly the what do you call that? The electronic waste. Electronic waste. Yeah. So based on this, not only we can create new revenues, we will also create new employment, and the technology is there already, you know, and it is quite simple and quite straightforward. We can produce energy through waste, through the process of incineration, simple incineration. You don't need to train our kampong folks anymore on how to segregate the waste, because anything can go inside the incinerator. Of course, minus the steel, cement, stones, and so on, which will be separated by using AI. Yeah, AI can separate those wastes for us, and it will produce steam, which will turn the turbine and produce electricity. Sarawak is going to do that next year, right? So that is one of the solutions that the girl was asking. And of course, the other economic opportunities in the rural areas, for Sarawak, I'm not very sure about Malaysia, but for Sarawak, is that we are going to develop our microalgae farm in the rural areas. Because it can be done. It can be done through the pond method, by just using the water tanks, you know, the water tanks, and we just provide them with the microalgae seedlings, and you know, microalgae will double every 3 days. Every 3 days will double, and double. And this is not only another new source of revenue for the kampong folks, but it will also increase our overall revenue for Malaysia, because you know the price of SAF, and now the legal requirement, international requirement, is only 1% of SAF for the plane, only 1% requirement. It will go up to 50% later on. And the price of SAF is that we don't sell by the nozzle. You know the nozzle, when you buy petrol at the petrol station, they don't sell by the nozzle, but they sell by the drops, per drop. So that's how expensive it is, and how the value chain is will give an economic impact, not only to the rural folks, but also to everyone who is involved in that industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, YB, for sharing the example. So I think time is up for us, and also to close off the session, I think today our panelists have shared a lot about the plans, the strategies that we have in place, and of course they have also shared the challenges. It's not easy to transition. There will be many challenges, but on the flip side, we do see many exciting opportunities coming up, given so many examples, new technology, innovations coming up. So to all of the panelists here, thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time to join us this morning. Thank you for sharing your insights. To the audience here, of course, I hope the insights here today, please do bring it back to your respective field. I hope it has been a insightful session for you, and wishing all of you a good day ahead. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much for the very insightful session just now on where we are and what more we can do in our pathway towards establishing a sustainable, fair, and inclusive green economy. Now, if I could kindly ask the moderator and speakers to remain on stage to receive our token of appreciation and for a photo session, let's invite Syed to give out the token of appreciation. First, we have Ms. Charlotte Wolff-Bye, Vice President and Group Chief Sustainability Officer of PETRONAS, also representing our gold partner. Mr. Gurdip Singh Sidhu, CEO of CIMB Malaysia and CIMB Bank Berhad, representing our gold partner, CIMB. Yang Berhormat Datuk Dr. Hazland Abang Hipni, Deputy Minister for Energy and Environmental Sustainability of Sarawak. Mr. Mohamad Irwan Aman, General Manager for Sarawak Energy Berhad. And last but not least, our moderator, Ms. Zhi Ying, Head of Member Relations of UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei, also representing our strategic partner. If you can have everyone on stage to come to the center for a group photo. We would also like to extend our thanks to our other gold partner, J Corp and C Group, as well as our telco partner, U Mobile. Thank you so much to the moderator and speakers for the session just now. Now, for your information, this session is also being live streamed on YouTube on the Perdana Fellows Alumni Association channel, and it's also playing outside at the Food Junction.